From the News Channel 5 Network, this is Morning Line with Nick Beres.
Good morning, everyone. Thanks for joining us on Morning Line. Nick Beres here with you on a Monday. I do indeed hope you had a pleasant weekend. And if you're sitting back this morning, stay inside. You'll get waterlogged. The drive in this morning, slick just because of wet roads, but it was okay coming in as early as I do. But yeah, they say we're going to have some rain here for a little bit and kind of need it, clear things out and get some water on the ground. But anyway, it's wet out, so stay inside. Join us on Morning Line. The phone lines will open them up for you here in just a moment. And we're going to be talking with our guest this morning, education. And we've done several stories. Obviously, last week was a special session of the legislature. And the big question right now for everyone is how, moving forward with COVID-19, do we hold classes in person? Do we do them virtually? A lot of parents, teachers have different opinions on that. The governor as well, and others. We're going to get into all of that this morning and take some of your calls with some of the most recent developments. And our guest to talk about it, Beth Brown with the Tennessee Education Association. She joins us live this morning. Good morning, Beth. Can you hear me loud and clear?
Good morning, Nick. Yes, I can.
It's good to have you with. So, did you have fun during the special session last week?
Well, it was fast and furious.
Man, I'll tell you, they went through a lot of it, and I think one of the big headlines that came out of it was the idea of maybe withholding some funds from some of the districts perhaps that don't go, in class as opposed to virtual. I don't think they ended up voting on it. That's not to say it couldn't come back up in February when the session comes back in session. But what did you think about that and where we stand on the discussion? I think we kind of know where the governor stands, and there just seems to be so many different opinions on whether or not classes should be virtual or in person, and it just depends on a lot of factors. What is your thought on that?
Well, as we've talked about before, Nick, educators believe there's nothing better than in-person instruction. Sure. That said, the Tennessee Education Association has been advocating since the onset of the pandemic that every decision has to be made in the best interest of health, safety, and well-being of Tennessee students and educators. And what we're seeing across the state are districts who are making decisions based on the case rates, based on the science of what's happening in their particular communities. We've seen districts who started in person who've had to back off and go to remote learning for extended or short or extended periods of time. And then we've seen districts where case rates have remained consistently high and then even seen an increase who have remained on a remote learning system. And so what we're seeing are districts who are making the decisions based on science. It was quite concerning to me as the president of the Tennessee Education Association, and certainly our educators across the state, to hear members of the General Assembly threaten to withhold funds from districts who are making the best decisions they can. And I have to point out that local control over school districts has been a long upheld tradition and belief and value in the state of Tennessee, and it's disheartening to see any state leader threaten that control just because they don't like the decision that local districts are making.
And why do you think it is, if you can play devil's advocate, put yourself in their shoes, what is it that they don't like? Is it that there's just a core group of individuals out there, and a lot of parents as well, who just say, look, let's get back to in-person classes. The education, as we think all agree, is better when there are in-person classes, and they just don't think the risk is there. Is that the thinking you believe?
Well, I do believe that there's recognition that in-person instruction is best when it's safe. I think where the disagreement lies is whether or not the health risk is sufficient to call for the continuation of remote learning.
Okay.
I think therein lies the disagreement.
Yeah, it's what I really don't get. And I hear from parents on both sides of it. I mean, we've done our share of stories on teachers who have gotten COVID and died. You know what I'm talking about? I mean, gotten COVID
Absolutely.
And died. Now, I'm glad to report that I haven't seen, or we have not reported, as far as I can think of off the top of my head, of too many students who have died from it. I know students have become infected, and as we know, younger people tend to recover and do better, which is a wonderful thing. But I just just me sitting here, and I'm someone who has a child at a university level, I don't get the rationale of forcing the hand or taking the decision out of local districts that are trying to make this call. I don't get it. Do you?
Absolutely. And the other thing to think about, just from a local perspective, when you are talking about taking that decision away, you are taking the decision away from the members of the school board who citizens in that district elected to represent them at the local level to make those decisions. It just seems very incongruent with the values that our General Assembly espouses, is that element of local control over education.
Yeah, and you talk about school boards, and certainly there is some disagreement on school boards. I don't know if you're aware of the fuss that happened on social media this weekend. Metro School Board member Fran Bush, I think, kind of upset with the way things are going in Metro, and she basically went on to post this weekend towards, I think, some of the school teachers and the like. Enough of your bull. We are going to open in person soon. Either you want to teach or quit your day job with MNPS. I am sick of your tactics and your agenda. And the MNEA president, Amanda Kale, now says she's filing an ethics complaint over the bullying tactics of Fran Bush. But is that what it's come to now? I mean...
Well, I will tell you, I've heard very little about that situation. I'm aware that there is a situation, but I've not heard much about it, so I would hesitate to speak definitively on that. What I will say is that this idea that educators are simply sitting back and not doing their jobs when they're teaching remotely is completely false. There are many educators who are teaching remotely for the first time this year for an extended period of time who will tell you that it takes a lot more hours than they're accustomed to shift from in-person to online instruction. And so what I can say definitively is our educators are working very, very hard, whether they're in person or teaching remotely, to meet the needs of our students.
So do you believe that's some of the sentiment against the virtual learning, that for whatever reason, those who are critics of it feel that the teachers are at home cooling their heels and not really doing a good job?
Well, I have certainly seen some comments to that end on social media and in response to debates happening at the General Assembly. But I can assure you that educators are working hard, whether they're working from their homes or whether they're working in a classroom. Educators are working harder this year than they've ever worked in their entire careers.
Okay, yeah, and look, I can tell you that there are an awful lot of people right now, including here at News Channel 5. I'm about the only reporter who comes in every day. Everyone else is working remotely, and I can tell you all of our other reporters are working very hard. Just because I don't see them come into the station here doesn't mean they aren't working hard. Same thing with the producers and everyone else, because you see the product on the air every day. Now, I know that the issue here is, virtual learning, as you said, maybe not as good as in person. I'm just wondering then, do you think if some of these districts obviously still need to stick with virtual because of the potential risk that remains from COVID-19. Is there more that maybe can be done? Have we explored all the possibilities with regard to making this virtual learning better? I don't know how far you can go. I know it's online, it's on a laptop, you get the kids through it. What do you think teachers have learned to this point about what works and doesn't work?
So that's a challenging question, because it's going to vary from district to district, especially depending on the kinds of resources that the districts have been able to provide students and educators. But we know that some of the challenges are dealing with connectivity and familiarity and comfort with the virtual platform. Even though they've been doing it all year, there are still challenges. There are challenges for families, for students who are not able to concentrate as well at home, and just the kinds of resources and the kinds of instruction that can be provided via a virtual platform versus in person. There are just a number of challenges that just run the spectrum, and again, it's going to vary by district.
Yeah, it sounds to me, the bottom line is you can only do so much, and it's just not going to get to the way it is in person, at least not for now. Listen, let's take a quick break. When we come back, we can take some phone calls, 737-7587. If you have a question or comment, I'd like to hear from you what you think. Is it safe for kids and the teachers to be back in person, maybe wherever it is that you live? I'd like your opinion on that, and we'll come back and discuss this more with our guest right after this. Stay with us.